Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In today's episode, we will talk about SMS services being restored in the Jammu and Kashmir region. We will also talk about why Wikipedia is worried about guidelines that the Indian government is trying to implement. But first, we talk about Uttar Pradesh. For nearly a month now, protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act and the NRC have been going on across the country. As we have discussed in previous episodes, out of all the states, Uttar Pradesh has been the one that has been the worst affected. 19 deaths have taken place in the state as protests had turned violent in at least 12 districts. One of these districts was Sambhal, where protests had taken place last week and where 2 people had died. Now, 2 days back, Indian Express got details of 2 FIRs that were filed in the matter at the Kotwali Sambhal police station in the district. One FIR was against 17 persons for alleged rioting, and the other one was related to the killing of 23-year-old Mohammed Sheroz. But the 2 FIRs were vastly different and showed glaring gaps. In this segment, Kaunain Sheriff, who broke the story, joins us to talk about the FIRs. Kaunain, could you first talk about the protests that took place in the Sambhal district? What do we know about them turning violent?
So Sambhal district is one of the few districts in Western UP that was impacted by these Constitutional Amendment Act protests called by various Muslim groups in Western UP. To be very specific, in Sambhal, unlike other districts, the protests went on for 2 days. One on Thursday, which was called by basically all the activists, civil society members there. This protest saw police registering an FIR of rioting. It also named 17 people, charged them with rioting and damage of property under the IPC. The second day was not confined to civil society, but we saw a long protest march. It also included women, it included children. At this protest specifically, in the afternoon at around 3 o'clock, a large number of people had gathered around what is called the Shankar Chauraha, which is like the Jantar Mantar of Sambhal, around a college where protests usually happen. 2 people were shot dead. They suffered bullet injuries. They were declared dead by the government hospitals the same day. Although we still don't know what were the bullet injuries, whether it belonged to the police, whether it belonged to the civilians. So that is not clear.
This has been a point of contention across UP where the protesters say that the police are fired and the police say that the protesters are fired.
Yeah. So 2 big FIRs have been launched. One related to the rioting on the first day, and second related to the murder on the second day. So you're seeing that 2 different investigations have been underway in Sambhal. So this is the background on what happened in Sambhal on Thursday and Friday.
Now, you got the access to 2 of those FIRs. And what seems to stand out is that these 2 FIRs are remarkably different.
So when we got access to these 2 FIRs, we saw glaring loopholes in the way both were written. First, we need to understand the importance of an FIR. FIR is the first piece of official document or an evidence that will sort of show which way the investigation is going. In the sense, we'll know what is the evidence that the police has, or who are the witnesses that the police has, or what is the reason for death. And it is very common that in a murder case, the FIRs are very long. It is very detailed. All the evidence, all the examination that is done when the body is taken to the hospital, what the doctors have told to the police, the reason for death, all of this is recorded in the FIR. However, in the murder FIR, we saw something very drastically different. It was just 1 paragraph, less than like 10 sentences. This was just the complaint of the uncle of the victim, Mohammed Sheroz, that the body was found near the protest site. He was taken to a hospital, declared dead, and that's it. It just ends abruptly. Firstly, the first mention that there's a government hospital involved. The FIR doesn't mention who's the doctor who examined, what time did the doctor declare him the victim dead. Okay, what was the cause of death? Whether he found bullets, nothing is there. As of today, even till date, the doctors and the police have not submitted any postmortem report to the victim. The second thing is that since this happened at a protest site, there were a lot of police deployment at the site. However, again, there is no mention of whether the police was deployed there, whether there was an eyewitness, whether they've taken testimonies of eyewitnesses. So nothing of this has been mentioned in the FIR. So 2 things. The third most prominent thing in the FIR is that the fact that it's a dead body, there's a gun or a bullet injury, but Section 302 of the IPC, which relates to punishment of murder, is not mentioned in the FIR. Instead, 304, which relates to culpable homicide not amounting to murder, has been invoked, which means that the police has not even invoked murder charges in the FIR. They assume that it's not a murder and it's just a culpable homicide not amounting to murder. I mean, this is a big question mark as to why murder charges have not been invoked. Are they giving clean sheet to someone that they know what is the rationale behind it? So we don't know. This is something unusual, unprecedented related to murder FIR. However, when we come to the other FIR, which is the rioting FIR, since firing took place during rioting by the police to control the mob, they have specifically mentioned the names of all the police officers who have been deployed during the protest. They've also mentioned all the accused. They've identified each of the accused there, and they've charged them with not one section of the IPC, but at least 7 sections of the IPC, unlike in the murder, just where only one section has been invoked. Third, they have also mentioned the firing took place, at what time the firing has taken place, and then they've told who fired and why did they fire. And in the sense, they've given a clean sheet to all the officers who were involved in firing, saying that they did to stabilize the crowd and in self-defense. Third, they've also said which property was seized. And fifth, they have told about the injured policemen. What is important to note is that both these events, although happened in the span of 24 hours, are in the close vicinity. Police was deployed. In one FIR where murder happens, you're not even mentioning about the deployment of police and who were the witnesses around there. In the second, you have meticulously recorded each of the witnesses, the timeline, the identity, and all of those things. So these are two very, very distinct way the FIRs have been written by the UP police.
How will these FIRs impact both these cases? How will this FIR of the murder of Mohammed Sheroz impact its case with such lack of detail?
So that's the most important thing to look at. Any murder, when it happens involved in a crowd or whatever, what you have to do is a simple test that the police has to prove before the court that they have evidence which is beyond reasonable doubt, because you don't have eyewitnesses to come before. So you say that besides the eyewitnesses that police has, you have the scientific evidence. The absence of both in this FIR is very clear that the police will not be able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So then the accused identity cannot be ascertained in such cases. So it will result in an acquittal. However, in a writing case, when so many details are there from witnesses, from the timeline, from the identity itself of the accused, that case can be proved beyond any reasonable doubt. So that will in fact result in a conviction. So you know that if these key evidence are not there, in a murder you have to have all of these key evidence, especially the scientific evidence, and that to corroborate with the eyewitnesses, stating that there is an eyewitness, I saw this shooting, and there is this bullet injury, which confirms that there was a shooting by whoever owned the weapon. That's how you sort of corroborate the evidence beyond reasonable doubt. So in these cases, because of lack of evidence, the benefit of doubt has to go to the accused. In fact, it's shocking that since 304 has been invoked in a murder case, it will be interesting to see how the courts even allow the trial to happen when you know that there is a dead person with bullet injuries, and a trial cannot usually go on IPC 304 in such cases. So it's simple that one case will result in an acquittal, another case should result in a conviction because of such strong evidence.
Next, we talk about Jammu and Kashmir. On Tuesday, after nearly 5 months, SMS services were restored in the region. And now, government hospitals have also been provided with broadband internet service. Naveed Iqbal, Indian Express's J&K correspondent, had joined us on a call yesterday to talk about this and the changes that the region has seen in the last couple of months. Naveed, SMS services were supposed to be restored on Tuesday. Have you started receiving SMSs yet?
Yeah, I did. On my BSNL postpaid number, I started receiving messages right away at midnight, New Year's. OTPs have also started coming in, although it seems a bit restricted because only BSNL to BSNL messages were initially restored. But if there's, say, a different network, but that's outside the limits of Kashmir, if you're in Jammu or any other part of the country, you can receive those messages. But within Kashmir, so to speak, only BSNL messages have been going. However, OTPs and other service messages are also coming in.
Okay, so now this is happening after nearly 5 months. In September, we saw landline services resume. Then in October, postpaid mobile phone services were made operational. But internet still largely remains down. Could you talk a bit about how this lack of internet has affected the region and how much will starting SMSs really help?
So see, we have to remember that only postpaid mobile phones are still functional with the option of sending text messages. All prepaid phones are still non-functional, and mobile internet has not been restored for Jammu. So Kashmir, we can't expect that for a while, and broadband either. Most payments are still by cash, and people are still paying bills in the old-fashioned at telephone exchanges and such. So OTPs were a big issue these past few months, as was like payment of bills, transfer of money. Those things will ease up now. Other than that, government has opened kiosks for students to fill forms and has restored internet just today at hospitals. So things are slowly easing up, but still a far cry from a fully functional state, so to speak.
How much has this affected the business in the region?
The last estimates that the Kashmir Chamber provided was to the tune of 10,000 crores. But these are again speculative. We have no way of confirming exactly how much businesses have suffered. But a lot of the farm labor and a lot of the workforce has definitely been drained from Kashmir.
During the shutdown, we have also seen a lot of political leaders being detained and being under house arrest. What do we know about when they are going to be released?
Political leadership in Delhi, including the Home Minister, have said that the local administration will take a call on when to release these leaders. But from what we hear over here, administration says that nobody in Kashmir is in any capacity to take a call on who to release, when to release, or where to detain them. These are calls taken by Delhi. So as of now, as we've reported today, out of 58 political leaders that were detained in this district in Srinagar, 26 still remain incarcerated under sections of preventive detention 107 and 151. But as we've reported, the three former chief ministers, Farooq Abdullah, Omar Abdullah, and Mehbooba Mufti, as well as 5 major party leaders, Sajad Lone, Shah Faisal, Naeem Akhtar, Ali Mohammed Sagar from the NC, and PDP Youth President Wahid Para. Barring these individuals, all others are likely to be released in batches throughout this month. So that is the shift that can be expected soon.
What is the estimate, like how many people were detained and how many are being released?
The government, the police have never provided an estimate for how many people have been detained throughout this clampdown that started on August 5th. Our initial estimates were 4,500 that were brought down to 2,500. As of now, administration sources tell us that there aren't more than 800 people that are detained all over Kashmir and roughly 200 people that are detained in jails outside Kashmir. So those are the figures. But as of political detainees that were housed in Srinagar, initially there were 58 people at SKICC that was declared a sub-jail around August 4th. And now in the MLA hostel, there's 26 remaining so far.
Okay, so apart from this, what are some of the other changes that we have seen on the ground since the last couple of months?
Well, in the last couple of months, after the initial clampdown eased a little, since then there's been more traffic on the road, and eventually last month, even public transport started and markets have started to open up. But school exams were held hurriedly and college exams were held in a rush. Kashmir has a longer winter break as opposed to the rest of the country. So schools and colleges have shut down. So currently only banks and private businesses, those kind of outlets are open. Otherwise, it's mostly how it is in the winter. It's slow.
What about tourism? How did we see, since the clampdown, the tourism in this region being affected?
Gulmarg is usually a big favorite with tourists from outside the country during the winter. And domestic tourists prefer to come to Kashmir during the summer, like Sonmarg and Pahalgam, those meadows, essentially. This summer was wiped out by this clampdown, this tourist season. But so far, we don't see very high number of tourists coming in for skiing in Gulmarg either.
Okay, so now what is the next big thing? What are people hoping for now?
So ahead of the government's announcement to start SMS services, people were really hoping that mobile internet might be started in Jammu and broadband for Kashmir. Jammu already has broadband services operational. But that didn't happen, and we are still working out of this government facility with 10 computers in Srinagar. I think the next step that everyone's hoping for is that broadband will be open across Kashmir.
And last, we talk about Wikipedia, the world's largest online encyclopedia. The non-profit that funds Wikipedia is worried by the guidelines that India soon plans to implement. In a letter to the IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad, Wikimedia Foundation said that its model would be severely disrupted by the implementation of the new guidelines. Karishma Mehrotra joins us to talk about these guidelines and how they are likely to affect Wikipedia. Karishma, could you talk about why Wikipedia is worried about the new guidelines that India plans to institute? What is the background to this response by them?
So the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the nonprofit that funds Wikipedia, sent the IT ministry a letter outlining their concerns. The main concern that I took from the letter was that the voluntary model that Wikipedia uses to create and publish knowledge, which is volunteers across the world curate and edit documents online together. That model would be disrupted because to abide by these intermediary guidelines, the foundation would need to institute a sort of automatic filtering process because it requires shorter takedown timings. So to institute that automatic filtering process, it would have to change not just the geographic location of India and their use of Wikipedia. The model functions around the world, and the website is separated not by countries, but by languages. So these guidelines would affect that model for the entire world, not just for India. And India is one of the countries that uses the website the most. Indian readers visited Wikipedia over 771 million times this November, which is the 5th highest number of views to Wikipedia from any country in the world.
Is these intermediary guidelines, have other companies responded to them and sort of send similar letters to the Indian government?
Yeah, so when the draft of the guidelines came out roughly a year ago, there was quite a bit of backlash against them by the industry and civil society. So Wikipedia was actually part of a coalition of organizations that voiced concerns about freedom of expression and the burden that this might place on smaller nonprofits and businesses. WhatsApp also came out and said publicly that they would have to re-architect their entire system, including their encryption feature.
Has the government responded to this letter?
The government has not come out and said anything to Wikipedia from my knowledge, no. The biggest thing that this law institutes is it uses the word, at least from the draft of these intermediary guidelines, had said a couple of major changes to the IT Act. One of them was it mandated companies to, quote, proactively monitor content, unlawful content. So that is what these companies are interpreting to mean they'll have to institute some sort of automated filtering system. The second one is for the company to provide to the government the, quote, originator of information. So that would mean if there's a WhatsApp message that's forwarded around, trying and figuring out who originally sent this WhatsApp message and give that information to the government. So those are two of some of the big changes. There are other changes as well, but these ones are the ones that the companies have been discussing the most.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show, as always, was edited and mixed by our producer, Joshua Thomas. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.